The chair left the ground already spinning, thrown at head height across a film set, and 40 people watched it fly toward the small man in the director's chair, and every one of them flinched, except the one it was aimed at. Bruce Lee did not move. He did not duck. He did not throw up a hand. He did not lean an inch out of his seat. He watched the chair come the way a man watches a bus he already knows will stop short, with a flat, unbothered attention that was somehow more unsettling than any dodge could have been. And the chair crashed down and skidded across the dirt an arm's length in front of his boots, exactly where he had known it would, and he had not so much as tightened his jaw. To understand why a 300-pound man would throw a chair at the head of the fight choreographer on his own production, you have to go back 2 weeks, to the first day of the shoot, and to a resentment that had been curing in the desert heat like something left too long in the sun. His name was Brunner, and he was one of the great physical specimens of the stunt world. He was 6'5" and built like a grain silo, a former strongman and wrestler who had found his way into pictures the way big men did in those days, by being able to take a fall and throw a punch and look terrifying doing it. He had a real history behind the size, a childhood hauling freight, a decade in the wrestling territories, a reputation as a man you did not want to actually anger. On this picture he was playing a brute, a hulking henchman in a rough western, all fur and leather and menace, and he was, in the narrow craft of being enormous on camera, genuinely excellent. Directors loved him because he filled a frame. Stunt coordinators loved him because he never got hurt and never hurt anybody by accident. For 15 years, Brunner had walked onto sets as the biggest and most important physical presence in the building, and for 15 years that had been enough. He had built an entire sense of himself on being the one nobody could overlook. If you want to understand what turned a good professional into a man who would hurl furniture at someone's skull, stay with this, because it was not the small man doing anything to him. It was the small man not needing him at all. Because the production had hired a fight choreographer, and the fight choreographer was a slight Chinese-American half Carl's size who had, in 2 weeks, quietly become the center of gravity of the entire set. The director deferred to him on every action beat. The camera operators changed their setups when he suggested it. The young stunt performers followed him around between takes like students. And Brunner, who had spent 15 years being the man other men waited on, found himself being corrected, politely, precisely, and correctly, by a person he could have picked up with one arm. The small man would watch Carl throw a worked punch, and then show him, without any unkindness at all, how to make it read better on camera, how to sell the hit with less effort, how to move a body Carl's size so it looked fast instead of heavy. And every correction, however gentle, landed on Carl as the same message: you are a tool here, not an authority, and the authority is him. He started saying things, in the equipment truck, to the other stuntmen, in the low grumble of a man who needs an audience for his grievance, that the little guy had never taken a real hit, that all this reading your opponent and staying relaxed was fine for the movies but would fall apart the second something real came at you, that everybody flinches, everybody, and that the choreographer's whole calm act was just a man who had never been tested. He said it enough times that it became a thing he believed, and then a thing he needed to prove, because a grievance repeated often enough stops being a complaint and becomes a plan. There is a particular danger in that kind of grievance, and stay with this, because it is the thing that made the chair inevitable. A man who resents being overlooked does not want a fight, exactly. He wants a witness. He wants the room to see the thing he believes about himself confirmed, and Carl had spent 2 weeks unable to get anyone to see it, because the small man kept being right and kept being gracious about it, and there is nothing a resentful man can do with a rival who is both correct and kind. The pressure had nowhere to go but up. The chance came on a slow afternoon. They were resetting a saloon exterior, the light going gold, 40-odd crew members standing around in the lull between setups. The small man sat in a director's chair near the camera, reviewing the next sequence in his head, and off to the side the film's star, a lean, sharp-eyed American actor in a denim shirt and dark glasses, a man who did his own stunts and had an unerring instinct for who on a set was real and who was performing, leaned against a light stand and watched the way he watched everything, which was closely and without seeming to. And Carl Brunner, standing near a stack of breakaway furniture, looked at the small man sitting relaxed and unguarded in that chair, and decided the moment had come to show everyone that the great expert would duck like anybody else. He did not announce it. He picked a wooden chair off the stack, a real one, not a breakaway prop. The crew was clear about that afterward, and he kicked it, hard, spinning it across the set, directly at the small man's head. It happened fast enough that the reactions came in a ragged wave. A sound man shouted, a woman with a clipboard cried out. A young grip actually threw up both hands as if he could stop it from 30 feet away, and the star came off the light stand in one motion, his glasses coming off, already moving. 40 people had a fraction of a second to be afraid, and 40 people spent it exactly the way Carl had bet the choreographer would spend his, bracing, recoiling, getting ready to see a man hurt. Here is the part worth staying for, because the entire point of the throw was the flinch, and Carl never got it. The small man had read the whole thing before the chair left Carl's boot. He had seen Carl drift toward the furniture. He had caught, at the edge of his vision, the particular gathering of a big man about to commit his whole body to something. He had known what was coming in the half-second that is the only half-second that matters. And in that half-second he had done the arithmetic a lifetime of training does, without asking permission. The weight of a wooden chair, the angle of the boot, the height of the launch, the drag of the air on all those spinning legs. And it had resolved into a single certainty, as clean as a court ball, short and to the side. A flinch is what the body does when it does not have that arithmetic, when it only knows that something is coming fast and cannot say where. He had the arithmetic, so there was simply nothing in him to flinch with. So he did the one thing that answered it completely, which was nothing. He sat. He tracked the chair with his eyes and let his body remain exactly as it was, and the chair spun past the edge of his knee and crashed into the dirt beside him. And the small man turned his head, unhurried, and looked at it lying there, and then looked back at Carl Brunner with an expression of mild, almost scientific interest. The set had gone dead silent. The flinch Carl had wanted, the duck, the scramble, the great expert made ordinary, had not come, and its absence was louder than any crash. Carl stood there, breathing hard, his whole plan lying in the dirt next to a chair, and he did the thing men do when a bluff fails, which is double it. He demanded to know whether the little man was too good to react like a human being. He said, loud, for the crew, that a real fighter would have moved, that sitting there was a trick, a pose, that the choreographer had just proven he didn't understand real danger, and the small man stood up. He did it slowly, and he was not angry, and that was the thing the crew remembered, that there was no heat in him at all as he stepped out of the chair and walked across the open ground toward the enormous stuntman. He stopped a few feet away, looked up the great height of him, and said, quietly, in a voice pitched to carry just far enough, "You wanted to see me flinch," he said. "You believe everyone flinches," he said. "All right, let's find out who does. Stay with this, because what happened next took under 10 seconds, and it turned Carl Brunner's entire argument around and drove it straight back through him." The small man did not attack. He simply raised his own hand, casually, as if to make a point in conversation, and Carl Brunner flinched. His head jerked back, his shoulders came up, his hands twitched toward a guard, His weight rocked onto his heels. It was small, and it was involuntary, and it was total, and 40 people saw it happen to the man who had just told them all that everyone flinches but the choreographer. The small man had not even touched him. He had made the smallest feint, a flicker of the fingers, the kind of thing a trained man throws out to read another man's wiring, and the great unshakable stuntman had recoiled from a hand that was never coming within a foot of him. The small man lowered the hand, slowly, and did not smile, and let the silence do the work. Somewhere in the crew, a single person laughed, and then swallowed it, because it was not really funny, it was just true. Then he said, "That is a flinch. Everyone has one." He said, "Mine did not fire a moment ago because I had already read the chair before it left your foot. I knew where it would land, so there was nothing in me to flinch." He said, "Yours just fired because you could not read my hand." That is the whole difference between us. It is not that you flinch and I do not. It is that I see what is coming and you do not. And a man who cannot see what is coming will flinch at everything for the rest of his life. Carl swung. Of course he swung, humiliated, exposed, a big man with nothing left but the one thing he had always trusted, a real overhand, all of it, aimed to take the small man's head off in front of everyone. And the small man was not there. He had read the punch being borne in Carl's shoulder, the same way he had read the chair, and he had stepped inside it, past the arm, into the one place a man that size can generate nothing, and from there he did the minimum the moment required. He caught the driving wrist, added a touch of guidance to a punch already overcommitted, and let Carl's own enormous momentum carry him forward and down, turning him, sitting him into the dirt beside the fallen chair, not struck, not hurt, just suddenly and undeniably on the ground next to the furniture he'd thrown, having missed a man half his size by a foot and put himself down doing it. The small man stood over him and did not gloat and did not offer the warm hand and the easy forgiveness that these stories so often end on, because this was not a proud man who had tested him honestly. This was a man who had thrown a solid chair at a seated person's head out of envy, and there are things that do not earn a soft landing. What he did instead was crouch, briefly, so only Carl could hear him, and say something short and even. The two grips nearest swore to the shape of it for years, that the small man told Carl he was a good stuntman, genuinely, one of the best big men in the business, and that being the best big man in the business had been enough for 15 years and could have stayed enough if he had not needed everyone else to be smaller. Then he stood and stepped back and left Carl Brunner to get up on his own, which, in front of 40 people, was the hardest fall of his career. The star in the denim shirt had watched all of it without moving, glasses still off, and he did not applaud and he did not say much. He was a man who had spent his life around people pretending to be dangerous and had built a fortune on being able to tell the pretenders from the real thing at a glance, and what had just crossed his face was the quiet recognition of one professional for another. He walked over to the stunt coordinator and said something short and low, and the crew went back to work the way crews do, too fast, talking too much, and the golden light held and the cameras rolled and the afternoon closed over the thing as if it had not happened. But it had, and everyone knew it had, and the set was not Carl Brunner's set anymore, and it never became his again. He was gone within days. Not fired in a scene, nothing dramatic. The coordinator simply found that the remaining sequences didn't require a man of Carl's particular size, and the schedule quietly rearranged itself around his absence, which is how a film set removes a man it has decided it is finished with. Carl finished his few remaining shots and drew his pay and left, and the title everyone would later hang on the story was not wrong. The chair was the last real mistake he made on that picture, because after it there was nothing left for him to do there but leave. He worked for years more. He was too good at the physical craft not to. But the men who knew him said something had changed after that afternoon in the desert, that the loud certainty had gone quiet, that he stopped telling the story where everybody flinches, and that once, late, to a younger stuntman who was getting a big head about his own size, Carl told the true version. He told it plainly, and he did not spare himself, and he ended it the way the small man had ended it, crouched in the dirt with a hand on Carl's shoulder. He said the little man had told him he could have stayed the best big man in the business his whole life, and that the only thing that had ever cost him it was needing everyone else to be small.